So today I'm going to talk about alcohol, endogenous opiate release, and addiction. Now, I saw a video from Jordan Peterson, which is why I may or may not put him in the title, just because I saw him talking about how, there were certain individuals whose dad was an alcoholic and their father was an alcoholic, and I think it's like having three male relatives who are alcoholics can put you at risk of being an alcoholic. And he mentioned how they all had this gene that meant they get an opiate release that isn't seen in everyone. I know also I mean, this is just off the top of my head, but I believe Andrew Huberman talks about a similar effect from another gene that affects dopamine release. Now, I don't know if these two are related, but I'm going to focus more on the opiate aspect. Maybe I'll look into the dopamine aspect another time. Anyway, and as you may or may not know, though, dopamine is very important in addiction. And anyway, that's a whole nother video. But I was reading this paper which I managed to find. It's called Influence of Endogenous Opioid System on High Alcohol Consumption and Genetic Predisposition to Alcoholism. So it's quite interesting, but it's a little bit long, I think, just for the random person to read. But it says it speaks a lot about different things, but I was very interested in this opiate release. And two things I've taken from this is that some people will have a lower basal, so lower level of endorphin slash opiates than someone else, and that can make them more likely to drink alcohol. I believe also their opiate system will go lower after drinking alcohol than someone else. But basically, some people might have a lower basal endorphin slash opiate system, so they might be more inclined to drink alcohol. Basically, they might not feel as good naturally, so they might be more inclined to drink this alcohol because they can get, this response from it. Number two is that they found in these high risk individuals who have lots of alcoholic family members versus the low risk who don't have alcoholic family members, they found this release of an endorphin. I'm not quite sure if it's opiate, but it's like endorphin slash opiate release, and then this like feel good opiate slash endorphin. I'll tell you the specific name in a second. Is released when it's not released in low risk individuals, and that's quite interesting because if it's quite easy to judge someone for being alcoholic, but it's easier for some than others, and that's because not all drugs affect everyone the same way, and this can be applied to all drugs. So, for example, some alcoholics might get a massive high from alcohol, but some people don't even enjoy it or get a high from it. So, it's very easy to say, oh, well, they're an alcoholic, but it's like, well, it's a very different first-hand experience, and individuals might also have lower um, base endorphins, opiates. Anyway, so that's the top level article. These two articles, the two studies, I've kind of referenced them. They look at different pituitary beta endorphin and adrenal cortisol response to ethanol, with high and low risk for future development of alcoholism. And that high and low risk is just whether they have alcoholic relatives. And the other study looks at enhanced pituitary beta endorphin release to or sensitivity to ethanol release, which is basically alcohol. So yeah, I won't go into too much detail. They also talk about cortisol slightly going up in one study, but not in another study. That the main part here is that beta endorphin response, and that's kind of what seems to appear in these high risk individuals, but not in the low risk. So this could be like a very big factor in treating alcoholism. And I believe there's even on the big article, they're talking about all these studies and references. They talk about how you can use opiates. They've used opiates in the treatment of alcoholism. I think it's all very or at least they've used that pathway to try and help alcoholism. I just think it's really interesting, and I think this mixed in with the dopamine response is, such a crazy look into how how you can get these insane responses from alcohol that aren't seen in everyone. As someone who does have alcoholic parents, and I think all my relatives, well, most of my relatives are alcoholics, and I definitely do get a big high from alcohol. So it's very interesting to see them firsthand, and I'd love to see my genetics and my response. But anyway, yeah, I thought it was quite an interesting video, interesting idea, and yeah, thanks for listening.